I've been retired about 3 years. I'm from the aerospace background, and like so many of us gray-haired folks, we started off with small radios, some that you can build with parts you find, some that are available in full kit form right here in the store. And we enjoyed and we learned what's taken place, and be surprised how simple it goes together and how much education you can get from it. And so we moved on and we acquired stuff, and I've been in my house 32 years. You know what my garage looks like now. And it pains me to tell me that I have to get rid of some of that stuff because other things are given. Once you get in an area somewhere, somebody comes over and says, you need this, or can you take this? I can't throw it away. And so ever since the middle of high school, I started into ham radio, which was a kind of a popular vogue thing of the time. Other technology items are taking place right now, but that offered a lot of hands-on experience and a lot of learning, and you get to know people that are willing to teach, and pretty soon you start building a pile, and college happens, life happens, and then you get back into it, and my stuff moves on. I've got one daughter. She took no interest in my stuff. It'd probably go on the street if it's left to her. Let me introduce Lance Borden.
Hi, I'm Lance Borden. I'm like Tom. I was in the aerospace industry for most of my career, and most recently at the Johnson Space Center, as you were. We were on the shuttle program, and I was an engineer in the Shuttle Avionics Integration Laboratory for 14 years, and then spent the remaining years of my 37-year career there as a RF nav aids engineer for the space shuttle, some of the navigation equipment on the space shuttle, radars and so forth. And I'm a ham. I've been a ham since 1961 when I was in junior high, and then started out, my interest in radio was my grandfather, who was an aerospace engineer, bought my brother and I a crystal set when I was 8 years old, and I was so fascinated with that that I've just stayed with it for my whole life and made a career of electronics. But I'm retired now. I operate a little business. We make radio kits, which Chris sells here in his store, and I tinker around with old airplanes. So that's basically what I do.
And Bill Worsner?
I'm Bill Worsner, and I'm the president of our local club here, and have been for quite a few years. I restore vintage radios. One of my specialties are vintage car radios, 6-volt types that even have the vibrators. And today I did bring in an early homebrew set. Homebrew means you put it together from scrap parts from right here in Houston. And this was probably assembled by a gentleman back in the 1920s. And if we get a chance here, you might want to open the lid and take a look inside. It's a one-tuber with a set of headphones. But my interest in electronics began when I was quite young, but I ended up being a chemist. Retired from Shell Research after many years. And, you know, sometimes people can be disease carriers. You know, you come in contact with something, but it doesn't take hold of you to where it's visible. Well, my youngest son, I got his degree in electrical engineering. Of course, he caught the bug from me. It was kind of hidden within, I guess. So he's a solar power engineer.
Thank you, Bill. So I can tend to talk fast and get a little excited sometimes, and so stop me. You're supposed to learn, you ask questions, you sit in the front of the class, you ask questions. And so I've prepared some charts and some working gizmos here, and I just wanted to begin with some basics. Bill brought along something I thought is fairly novel. It's really old school. Everybody raise their hand here. Everybody knows what a diode is. All right. Let me show you an early diode. It's glass, so I won't pass it around, but has a screw base, and in the very beginning, if you wanted to rectify something, this is an example of what was coming available. 1928.
Probably this was used as a rectifier in
Don't let these things drop if you get hold of one of them.
Can I just give a brief introduction of what this is about?
Very brief, yeah.
When Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, we're told the filament of the first successful light bulb depended upon Japanese bamboo. They were sitting around the laboratory trying to find something that would last. They put it in a vacuum and powered up, but nothing seemed to last very long. It light, but then it burn out. And one day they were passing a jug of, the story I was told, passing a jug of whiskey around, probably late on a Friday afternoon, and Edison was sitting back in a cane-back chair, and he was fidgeting around with his chair, and he pulled off a piece of bamboo, pulled off with his thumb. And why don't you take that and carbonize it and see if that works? They did. The first elements in these light bulbs were carbon filaments, and there's some that still are illuminated today. There's a fire station somewhere, I think in California, where they have a bulb that is still lit to this day.
In 1914.
1914, thank you. Yes. Well, one of the problems they had with the early light bulbs is that the carbon would deposit inside the glass, and it would get dimmer and dimmer as a function of time. So Edison, gee, what is this stuff coming off this filament? He wasn't really a chemist. He was what we call a parts, what we call a shelf shaker in chemistry. Okay, he just had his bottles of chemicals just labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. He didn't know, try this and some of that, mix it up, try this. He got an idea. He said, well, why don't I put some kind of an electrode or something around that filament to catch whatever is causing these light bulbs to glow dim. So he put this in there, and it turned out they found that, golly, they had current flowing through this thing. This became the first rectifier. This type rectifier tube here was used in motion picture theaters. In fact, where I used to run as a projectionist when I was in high school and Unitary College, we would use this to rectify the AC for our carbon arc lights, for our lamp houses. In fact, we had a set of 4 of these for each projector. Some of them had mercury in them. These do not. But you can see the filament. I forgot how many amps this thing drew. And this is the plate here, which collected the electrons and fed, of course, the arc and the lamp house to illuminate the screen. Okay, I'll put that back together for you.
Thank you, Bill.
I would imagine they are very, very bright.
No, they're not very bright. These are quite dim, really. The arcs are, yeah. But the rectifier tube, yeah, they glow. Nice warm glow.
So I started passing around in a Ziploc bag some electron tubes, and that's what we're going to talk about here in a minute. And we're going to begin with a triode now. Bill has talked to you about a diode, an early old school diode. We're going to talk about a triode, tri meaning 3 elements, di meaning 2. And so in simple form, I've tried to show here on the chart some of what takes place. Now, this is not absolute truth. There are exceptions. Manufacturers varied some products. There were innovations along the way. Of course, the war effort allowed the technologies to advance very, very, very fast. But a triode with its 3 elements has at its core a filament, a heater. Gets something hot. The thing that surrounds it that gets hot is a cathode, and it's going to throw off electrons. It's a metal that likes to release electrons, and those electrons need to go somewhere. They find something positive in the outer area called a plate. A plate at that time was positive in the area of 90 volts up. Some of the early radios in this area had tubes in it that wouldn't really hold up well for voltages above about 135 volts. Not a rule, tubes varied, and so technologies advanced, there were improvements, but that's the ballpark. Along comes a grid. A grid is like a spring, and if you look close on the inside of these tubes that were passed around, down on the inside is what looks like a very fine wire expanded spring, and that's called the grid. The electrons that were coming off the cathode were on their way to something positive, and they had to pass through that grid. Well, that allowed them to control something. You know what a light switch is, where you flip it on and off? That's a digital scheme. It's on or it's off. Light switches also have a little flicker, if you will, that you can move and it dims. That's an analog scheme of turning your lights on and off. On the triode, you have a grid in there where you can vary the voltage on the grid and you can vary the current that's going through the tube. That's an analog scheme. And we actually got amplification, they found, by doing this sort of thing. A very small movement of voltage on the grid would allow a fairly large change in the current flow through the tube, amplification. And so that's the reason why they started winding up in ships and homes and everywhere else. In the beginning, radios were battery powered, probably as this was. There was no AC on the farm. You brought your 6-volt battery out of your old truck or other batteries you bought, and you could power it and listen to broadcasts that were taking place. This is the golden age of radio that was breaking out. A diode, as we saw earlier, silicon diode you talked about, has 2 leads on it, di meaning 2. The positive one is the anode in a tube. It's called a plate. And the negative side is the cathode. The interesting thing about it is if it's silicon, it has a 0.7 volt drop across it. If it's a germanium, which became before silicon, it has like a 0.25 volt drop across it. If you're trying to break a signal out of very primitive and very small radios, you don't want to lose much in the forward voltage drop across a diode. When I said voltage drop, you're going to hear that again in a minute. I'm sorry, but I have to introduce a very simple equation called Ohm's law. I'm sorry. Don't be afraid. It's very much like miles per hour. Distance, rate, and time. You can compute in the three-element equation when you're going to be somewhere if you know how fast you're going and how many miles you got left. Three elements. Ohm's law is three elements. So the grid is going to accumulate a few electrons along the way, and if you don't bleed off those electrons with a resistor, the tube stops conducting electron flow towards the plate. You've got to drain off the charge. And so a resistor is put in that area to drain the electron charge to ground. And if you do so, then it will function just fine. It will amplify and not kind of run this potential up, which causes the tube to shut down. If we have a pentode where we add some additional components, grids within the tube, we have 5, pentagon being 5, pentode tube being 5 elements. That's the cathode, the plate, and 3 grids. Okay, now there are other tube variants that I just want to try to keep it simple here. And then there's a tube that has still more grids in it, a total of 5 grids, not 3 as in a pentode. It's a pentagrid converter, and that tube is kind of special, kind of like a dual input FET, a dual gate FET, in that it allows you to mix signals within the envelope of that tube. It shows up in radios as part of the heterodyne process, the super heterodyne process, I might say, but it's actually got total 7 elements. So in comparison, transistor to tubes, the tube currents, it's not a fixed boundary here. I'm trying to give ballpark type of numbers. Amplifying in the area of 1 milliamp. The demonstration I'm going to have here in a minute is around the area of 1.5 milliamp. And the sweep tubes that were in color televisions very easily handled a 1/4 of an amp with 800 volts on the plate. They actually wound up in power amplifiers, and sometimes ham radio power amplifier may show up here. But that doesn't end there. There are other tubes that handled far more current, much more current than that. Transistors, on the other hand, they're very comfortable below 1 milliamp, and I don't know where the upper bound is. I mean, 100 amp plus plus plus. I don't know where it is, and it's not going to stop with today's numbers. So, so this tube is an old school, different envelope that has, it's a pentode. Don't be alarmed with the mercury-looking coating there. That took place as they fired the entire inside of the tube with an arc, and it immediately consumed all the oxygen that would have shortened the life of the tube. Now, we talked about triodes. This is a compactron, a late technology tube, the 70s, mid-70s roughly. It has 3 triodes in it. So we passed around something a minute ago that had 1 triode, and this has 3 triodes in it. And this little tube right here, called a sub-miniature envelope, has 2 triodes in it. So this is even later, but I've got a World War II Navy receiver that has 29 of those in there as part of the entire circuitry. There's nothing any bigger. The whole job is done by 29 of those little sub-miniature tubes. Again, 2 triodes, 3 triodes, and 1 triode. Now, tubes varied according to the date in which they were produced, the technologies available, the power that was being handled. So in the World War II era, there were tubes that were producing a fair amount of power. You might have found these in shipboard transmitters. You might have found them in base stations, field equipment, and whatnot. I'm probably not going to pass it around. You're welcome to come up later, but those tubes were in abundance. As a matter of fact, I understand a tube with an envelope like that was used in one of the first computers. It was part of the war effort, and it's still over in England. I believe they have restored it. So let me move these aside. Still another tube in the progression of technologies became available, and this is a runt compared to what's available even today. This is ceramic and metal, and if I pull my flashlight out of my pocket here, I'll show you that it's got a finned radiator on it, and you can see that you better be forcing air through it to keep it cool. This equipment that has this type of tube in it is sometimes not popular because of the sound of those blowers that move air through this tube. But this is rated 250 watts. Some of the tubes you just saw here are 2 watts. So technology's changed, and this little, I call it a gem, if you will, because of its capability at higher frequencies. It just wound up in some really extraordinary equipment. All right, so let's, we've kind of talked about the different envelope changes, sub-miniature here. I did not bring a miniature. It's a little bit bigger than this, probably about the diameter of my finger. The pin configurations on the tube envelopes, has changed. There we go. This is what's called a miniature. So sub-miniature here, miniature, and then these other envelopes, there we go, changed along the way. This one is, I like to call it World War II era. You can see the little locking nature on the center pin there in the bottom. The tube is called a loctal. Has 8 pins, like some of these other tubes, like the one we're going to demonstrate in operation here a minute ago. But this was really good for mobile equipment and stuff you'd thrash around in the fields of Europe while our fellows were taking care of business.
Now, car radios.
Yes, mobile car radios. Thank you. And a minute ago I told you about the Compactron. This is what's called a dual decar with 12 pins. Another tube, which is, let's say, can be considered Compactron, has a different pin configuration at the bottom, 9 pins. It can be, all of them are really bigger than that. That's one of the smallest. So there's still other pin configurations. Right down this aisle over here, there's relays and relay sockets. Can you bring my miracle box up? One of the sockets that are in there has 11 pins, and it's easily confused with an octal. The pin configuration, yes sir, kind of looks like an octal, but it has 11 pins, and it's called a sub-magnal. This box, kind of where I stuffed everything in on the way in, and it was a miracle to get it all in, and a miracle to find it. But this is one of the sockets that we're talking about. Now, you can build circuitry like I've got on the cheap. That's what I want to show today. So here's where I'd like for you to start asking questions. We have several examples of how to build prototypes. You don't have to spend a lot of time. You don't have to spend a lot of money. For those that are interested, we have something at the end of the show. But tubes, as I said, like higher voltage. 90 volts, they kind of get real comfortable. 45, as we'll show in a little bit, they work just fine. Sometimes they go much higher, but how do you do this without allowing your young child to get shocked? You don't want any part of that. You don't want to even go there. Higher voltages can be, how do I underscore the word problematic? Anyway, so what I've demonstrated is here, you get a wall wart. There's nothing exposed here, anything different than your lamp cord. And this happens to be rated at 18 volts AC, and I'm going to power a tube with it. How do I do that? I go through a voltage doubler. And the thing I wanted you to see here is it's nothing exposed. It's cheap. These things are thrown away, given away. I've been given a box of them. I have so many now, it takes a while to go through and look for exactly what I want. They come in AC and the DC and the different current ratings, and we're going to talk about the importance of that current rating in a minute. But here is a voltage doubler. You see 1 and 2. 1 and 2. And I threw in an LED indicator just to let me know that it's still got voltage on it. LED, we're going to like to see you understand and be able to do that before you leave here today. So there's a balance. Design work is a trade-off. You have to weigh the considerations on either side. So you reach and grab something, and if it works for you, you're okay. So I didn't say anything about learning the color code there. I just told you the parameters to make a choice. Color code's fairly easy to learn. We only got 10 digits between 1 and 10 different colors. And so this is one way to prototype. On stock, solder terminals, and you use what you had to make something work. And this is going to work here in a minute. Here's another way. once again, the wood's getting less and less attractive as I go along, and this, what looks like copper, is really copper-clad steel that's used for roofing material. You've seen those houses that have beautiful, what looks like copper on the top. Well, copper's expensive. I think it's like $3 a pound. And this is just copper-plated steel. So one side is highly polished and easy to solder to, the other side is kind of blemished. And in this example, I just used epoxy, JB Weld. I love it. My dad used to fix engine blocks with that stuff. And so I built a tripler, 24 volts in, 100 volts out. That one was 24 volts in, maybe 68 volts out. So now we're getting up in the voltage for a tube, and we're still not exposing 115 volts to anybody. We got a wall wart again. I had to label this one B+ because I get a few wall warts running around there. This one I think is 24 volts in order to get 3 times that up at 100 volt DC. Everybody understand the difference between DC and AC? Give me a question if you don't. This is kind of important. Okay.
Your wall wart is AC out, right?
Yes, sir. That's how we kind of charge a capacitor, and it builds up from the other half cycle, and then pretty soon you're working with something on top of something.
Yep.
The half cycle of one is added to the half cycle of another, and the rectifying is taking place in there. And I threw in an LED to be sure the power was there or not. Now, how difficult was that LED to light? One resistor. 9 cents, 15 cents, whatever. And I'm going to give you some LEDs today. If you're going to tell me you're going to go away and build something, make something work. Okay, so here's what we're going to use to power our triode here in a minute. I got a lot of charts, obviously a lot of things to say. Here is a triode. Now, you've seen other triodes. There's 3 in this envelope, and there's 2 in this envelope, and larger ones over here. This one happens to have a metal envelope. I think they came along in the late 30s?
1932, 33.
Very good. Okay, and how difficult is this circuit? Disregard the resistor and the LED that you see there for a power on indication. How many resistors have I got in there? Okay, it's not very difficult, is it? We're going to amplify with this. And we needed one of these power sources over here to do it. Now this is a variable resistor, and I put it in what's called a cathode circuit, so I can change what's going on inside this tube. It's like a throttle indication, if you will. So we're going to get to that in a minute. Let me do some charts, and we'll come right back to some of this. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about the golden years of radio. This is a fine example. Come back to this a little after the event is over, and Bill has got a wealth of information, and there's a lot to be learned here. This was the rich period. We'll come to that a little bit later. These are tube examples. I just wanted to talk about some of this in brief. I understand some of these tubes, or some like these tubes, will be in the store really soon for an upcoming project, maybe something like this we're going to do. Turns out all these tubes right here are octal. Octal meaning 8, and that tube right there has 8 pins on the bottom. It's an octal tube. Turns out also that the same pins used for this tube activity is used for this tube and this tube. Well, there's something different here. Triode, pentode, rectifier. We talked about a rectifier a minute ago. So the same tube pins are being used on this octal to do much of the same thing in these 3 tubes. Well, we're going to use only the 6C5 today. That's what is in my circuit over here. Now, what do all these numbers mean? The first digit is the voltage of the filament. Now, at some point, so many manufacturers were coming in with so many tube variations, and technology was advancing so fast that the code, if you will, or the scheme for identifying what these other pieces of information meant kind of just vaporized. In the very early days, there was some meaning. It wasn't consistent. Anyway, vaporized. The only thing you need to learn today is that first digit means the filament voltage. When you walk down an aisle over there and you see tubes on display and ready for sale over there, look at those first digits. They are indications of what the tube filament is. Does it bother you that it's not a 6-volt tube? I mean, you're looking at something that might be an 8BQ8 or an 11 something or other or 14 something or other. No, it's not going to bother you, because you get a wall wart that's greater than that voltage and put a resistor in series, and you power the tube up, double check that it's got the right final voltage on it, and go forward. You don't have to worry about it. And sometimes these things are thrown away, given away, and right here for sale. So, an illustration. If you went in to buy a 6 BQ5, you'd pay $9 to $18. Buy the 8. Buy the 8 BQ5 or one of your finest. Don't have any fear. Wire it up, put a resistor in series off of a 10 or 12 volt wall wart, and make sure there's 8 volts on the filament. You get them new tubes, mail order for $6, less than half the price, a third of the price. So don't be afraid of that first digit. If you want to build yourself a triode, you just grab a triode, you start charging forward. Figure out the voltage that you're going to have to start with, something higher than what you need. Drop it down in a resistor and then power the tube for the voltage that it needs, and you're operational on that side. Use a wall wart and a double or a tripler, and you got your plate voltage. Before you know it, you drive some nails in a breadboard or something like that, and you got an operational triode. Now that's what I did here. I used copper-coated nails, iron nails. I didn't use the terminals or the epoxy and the roofing copper clad. I just used nails and wanted to illustrate by example. You don't need much of a board. A lot of this stuff is thrown away when they're building a new house. It's in piles out there. They got to take it away and recycle it. And the piece of plywood I'm using was left over from some contractor work on my house. So you drive some nails in them that are copper plated or brass, copper and brass. You can solder either one. Use wire. What kind of wire? Well, whatever you found. Wire's wire, you know, for low current circuits. But you can buy the good stuff and be consistent and color code what you're doing if you want when you buy it new right here at the store. Octal sockets, you can get those all kind of things. I mean, a lot of places. You can buy them new, dual stock, good used. You can pull
Right
them
here
out
at the
of
store
equipment.
too.
Yes. And by the way, I have no connection with EPO. I should have said this in the very beginning. I'm just a retired double E, and I was when I was enjoying my newest job out of school. There were like 6 or 8 stores around Houston. Wonderful stores. All kinds of stuff available.
And you know, Tom, they have 2 manuals too that you can.
Yeah. I want to give an example here just a
Like
second.
shows them internal workings of what all of them do.
Like on his shirt.
Yeah. This, by the way, is just a dual triode. Turns out that part number is for several tubes. But what I was saying was, there was a day when I used to travel around Houston on a Saturday, stopping at these various stores, picking up parts, and enjoyed it greatly. We don't have that many right now. And this store is by far the most outfitted store 5 times over than anything I think I've ever been into anywhere. And I like to drop in places in Dallas and other towns. So I just wanted to show you, we've got various schemes of how to get copper down and start being able to solder to it and make something work. Now, you said something very important. Thank you, Nancy. I told you I was going to talk fast. You get these tube manuals, which is, if you want something to hold in your hand, it's old school, that's what I do. That gives you a great deal of detail for all these kind of tubes. Did I say all? That's not a very thick book. And I've got one that attempts to try to get most of the tubes available in a certain period of time. And it's about double this thick. This is a 1947 issue. And you can still buy reprints, perfect new copy of this issue right here. Now, do you want information just tubes? Well, maybe you want to build a radio, maybe you want to build an amplifier. Here's all the circuitry back here with part numbers, and then up front is the theory. Wealth information, what do they cost? Maybe $15, new old stock, a reprint.
There's also a CD that
Yes.
has all those books.
Yes. And if you are of the I don't like paper approach, go to the Sylvania website, Sylvania Tube website, and everything that's in here and more on everything they ever made is on that website, and so you can have it electronically if you want. So many things are in here. Let's come back to this. I mentioned the web link right here. Now, how many tubes do you think they ever made? Hundreds of thousands of different variations, different part
There's
numbers.
thousands of them still left.
There's a place in Florida called ESRI, Equivalent Series Resistance. It just happens to be that way, ESRCI. And he has a warehouse. This guy answers the phone, I think, 6 days a week. And I have yet to find a tube he doesn't have. And Lance here once made 2 buys and shipped 1,000 of them overseas. And the man had to stop. Shipped them in 2 lots, 500 each.
1,000 tubes.
Yeah. And when I say local sources, man, there's not many places to go unless your friend's got a garage like mine or EPO, things like that. You just kind of want to graze around and find out what you like. Tubes require higher voltages. We talked about that across higher value resistors. I need to see hands of anybody. Please raise your hand if you don't know what I mean when I say resistor. Please raise your hand because it's kind of important here. Okay, so let me give you an example. I meant to bring 2 water bottles, brand new unopened water bottles. And let's say I take a screwdriver and I punch a hole in one, and I take a larger screwdriver and I punch a larger hole in the other. And I invert them and I squeeze both of them equally. Which water bottle is going to give me a bigger stream of water coming out of it? The bigger hole, yes. Okay, there is less resistance at that hole, the larger hole. There's less resistance there, and so the water, in our analogy current, comes out in a greater stream. And so the less the resistance, the greater the quantity of water, or the greater the amount of current that's going to be running. So resistors are vital to our understanding of electronics and basic radio. So we talked about Ohm's law and time, miles per hour, and distance. Here's our 3-part equation. And it comes in various forms. Let's go over to the simple part. The voltage across something is equal to the current through it times the resistance. Now, if you want to see that in a different form, I know this might be a little bit of new if you haven't been in division in school yet, but if we were dividing both sides of this equation by resistance, we would have V over R equals I R divided by R. And the R's would cancel out. So let me say that another way. What's 2 divided by 2? It's 1. What's 5 divided by 5? It's 1. What's X divided by X? It's 1. What's R divided by R? It's 1. 1 times anything? Don't worry about it. So V divided by R equals I divided by R. Did I say that right? And R divided by R is 1. So what do we just do? We just showed a different form of Ohm's law. Okay, so I left one open for you over there. What's V over I? Yeah, too simple. Okay, just look at it as miles per hour, distance, and time. You're going down the road, you're running 60 miles an hour, and somebody wants to know when we're going to be there, and you just passed a road sign that says 20 miles. Too easy. Oh. And so the more you practice that, the more you're going to find just how easy that is.
That's a 1, the ESRC 1.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
It's a 1, not an I.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that. Thank you. And don't hesitate to speak out. I sometimes let my mouth run out before my brain. Really? Yeah, it does. It's terrible. So how do we power a tube filament in high voltage? Wall warts. They're cheap. They're given away. They come in boxes, and I'll tell you where else you can get them for 50 cents. Interfaith Ministries. They don't want them. Anyway, 90 volts is a figurative type of thing. Tubes get real happy at that. Again, working radio over here at 45 volts. Okay, so everything I've shown here I've kind of talked about. There is something that I didn't quite get to. You see the red in that little square symbol right in there? That is a bridge rectifier configuration of 4 diodes, silicon diodes. You put them in a configuration like that, and you can turn AC to DC. Magic. AC in out of an AC wall wart, and all of a sudden you go through 4 diodes. You kind of have to pick the right value. I didn't say part number, but the right value, and you get DC. Well, that DC is coming out at every half cycle. It's bumpy. It's not DC yet. It's difficult to get amplification when you have so much disruption in the unfiltered waveform. So how do we filter that? Well, that's a capacitor. A capacitor wants to store energy. It releases it when it has an opportunity, but it'll charge right back up on the next opportunity and then release it. And that's how we filter rectified AC and make DC out of it. DC meaning direct current, like a battery in your car, like in your flashlights. And so you can easily do it with 4 parts, and they probably cost 10, 15 cents a piece. Or you can buy the package here at EPO, and it's got 4 leads on it, and it does that. Okay. So down here is something that's of importance I wanted to get to. Inside the wall wart, wall converter, whatever you want to call it, we have, unfortunately, an imperfect device. We have a little resistance on the inside of here that they can't quite get out. Nothing's perfect. This resistance has to do with the resistance of the wire that's in the winding of the transformer. We get a little loss, a little voltage drop across it. How do we get voltage drop? If any current is going through it, the voltage on this side of the resistor is higher than the voltage on this side of the resistor, so we drop some voltage, we come out with less. Now, here's our 2 times or 3 times doubler or tripler block diagram for these other examples I've shown to you, but I want you to look at this curve. And this is very much like electronics, it's imperfect. We have a plot here of voltage on one scale and current on the other, and then in red I've tried to show an example of what takes place on imperfect devices. Now it'll take place with a power supply over there that might be rated 150 amp. It might take place on the car battery, which is something you don't want to mess with, but most of these things have internal resistance. It's an imperfect device. So what does that mean? As we draw more and more current, the voltage starts to fold down, starts to drop that's coming out of the device. The usable voltage starts to drop. And so at some point, you're going to burn the winding open on the inside. And you'll get no more voltage out of it. You can throw that unit away. That would be called inherently current limited. At some point, this device is going to just die. It doesn't have to have a fuse for that reason, and it gets a UL listing because it's like that. It is inherently current limited. It just won't take more than a certain amount of current. And so you want to stay on the other side. Now what they do is they rate it with voltage and current, and at that current, they're going to give you that voltage. That's what it says. So you're somewhere along the curve. At 300 milliamp on one of these things I've got around here, it'll give you 6 volts. If you don't have any current flowing at all, you connect your meter to the open leads, well, you get a higher voltage. It's imperfect. You keep loading it up, you keep putting more and more tubes on there, more and more loads, more and more circuits and whatever, that voltage keeps falling down, and at some point it gets kind of a little warm, and then it stops altogether. All right, so that's kind of all over the head. So I think we've kind of come to a point where I can actually lash something up and show you some working stuff, and we've got about 15, 20 minutes before we might move the show a little bit. So it'll take me a minute to connect up some leads here, but I wanted to show you some other things. If you move around, you can see an oscilloscope over here in the background, and it's got a strange looking waveform on it. You might call it a signal, but it's a waveform by our definition. And let me show you what's producing it. 1 transistor, 1 capacitor, 2 resistors, no, I'm sorry, 3 resistors, and an audio transformer.
I, myself and a World War II veteran by the name of Bob Wood, who was a B-17 pilot, World War II pilot. I used to teach basic electronics. We did this for almost 15 years. And a number of classes were held near the medical center, in the restaurant there on Saturday mornings. One of the analogies that we used to use, now, did you all understand the filtering of DC? Tom mentioned about half wave and full wave rectification of AC to DC. You have a little bumps, okay. When you put this through a rectifier, and you had a radio or whatever, an amplifier, and you hear hums. Something's wrong with the filter capacitor. The way a filter capacitor, and Bob would love to use this explanation for this. How many are familiar with the very old-time steam fire engines? You know, you've seen them kind of picturesque things. They had a seat up here where the guy that controlled the horses, and then maybe a couple of guys hanging on the back, and had a steam boiler. And behind the guy in the seat, they had this big balloon-like structure, usually silver, maybe it had an eagle on top, very ornate. It was a surge tank. So the way this worked is you had a piston-type pump, rather than centrifugal maybe, and if you had this water from this pump, the steam pump, and you were spraying it onto a fire, you'd have like a big squirt gun, wouldn't you? Squirt, 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 squirt. Well, this tank is actually like a capacitor. You're feeding this water into it, and it is rising and falling. It's got an airhead above it, so it's evening this out. Yeah, you may see a little bit of a squirt in this stream, but you're going to pretty much a steady stream. This is what these capacitors do. The electrolytics, mainly we're talking about here, because they are able to handle much more current than these non-electrolytic types, which are essentially, used to call them tin foil wrapped with wax paper. In this case, the very early ones were actually glass jars, and they had about 1 microfarad. In another class, we'll get into some of this terminology, how this worked. Then later, they came up with what's called paste electrolytics. They call them dry electrolytics. There's a bunch of them for sale here, all kinds, believe me. Better living through chemistry, as we always say, okay? They do dry out in time. So if you're ever servicing some of this older equipment, the electrolytic capacitors are the things you really want to pay attention to. Some of the very early sets, like some of the Atwater Kents. There's a story about Atwater Kent. In the 1920s, he started building radios. He had radios with the Cadillac of all radios. These things were monstrous. They had fantastic sound to them. Around the time of the Depression, he decided that research had gone as far as it could go, that no one could ever make a better radio than his. He got rid of all of his research and development staff and continued to make his radios as they were. The Depression hit. People couldn't afford these great, big, monstrous, beautiful radios anymore. He went bankrupt in the 1930s. They're very collectible radios. They may have 1 or 2 here. Do you have any Atwater Kents?
No, unfortunately, I've never actually had an Atwater Kent in the
Try to get one
in the store. We'll try.
Okay. Anyway, this was a mistake he made. And one of the things in his radios, he didn't use the electrolytic capacitors. He used the old wax paper, tin foil, and they were gigantic. So to get a 4 microfarad capacitor that can handle maybe 450 volts, you had a thing about this big. And of course, as better chemistry came along, they got them down to what, the size of your thumb, or even smaller. So you see how technology progressed here in this thing. Okay? Now, when it came to radio, I brought this one in. I came across this here in Houston. It was what we call homebrew. This was put together in somebody's garage. I've forgotten this gentleman's name. His widow gave this thing to me. And it was on display at the Houston Historical Society back in 2006. This was along with a bunch of other radios at the time. And you're free to come look at it. It's a 1-tube radio. I'm not sure if this tube is used as a detector or an amplifier.
Can you tilt it forwards?
Yes, here we go. You see the batteries are still in it. And if you look on where my right hand is, you'll see some writing on this wood. This was taken from a fruit crate that he put together. Probably put together in his garage. This is the battery here. This is called a variometer. You can tune this thing to maximize your signal, how it comes in. And you have a variable capacitor here. A variable capacitor is one that has the sections that can be altered by mechanical movement by hand or motor control, of course. And if you look inside this thing, as I turn this thing, you'll see these leaves turning in and out. So if you're ever servicing old equipment like this and you feel a rasping feel to it whenever you try to tune in a station, you probably have one of these or more of these plates bent, and they can be easily bent back very carefully. And you want to keep them lubricated and use something like a spray clean. We got an excellent spray clean cell over here. It's right on this shelf over here called Deoxid. It's really great for removing corrosion in these radios, switches, and then volume controls and so forth. Highly recommend it, okay? And this is the battery. In those days, they didn't have enough gain, so you used headphones. Then they evolved into the case where they would use horn speakers. They would essentially take a headphone detector like this, a reproducer, and put it in a base. Then you had this big fancy horn, and you could hear the sound. So now you could sit around a room and listen to it. It wasn't until in the mid-1920s. The big thing in those days was trying to get sound with motion pictures. That was the big thing. Okay, we didn't have Technicolor at that time. It was black and white, but it was silent film. And you have somebody playing a piano or an organ in the movie theater, and you had to read what was being said.
Like Charlie Chaplin's?
Yes, the early Charlie Chaplin, for example. And they were trying to get sound for the motion pictures. This was a big thing. How are you going to do that? Somebody got the bright idea and said, hey, what we'll do is record the actors on a record, and we'll put this record on the projector, and we'll start the movie and get this thing synchronized. Well, that was a difficult thing to do. What if you had a break in the film and you had to splice a couple of frames out? Okay, they might open and close their mouth and then you'd hear what was said. It was a problem, keeping anything synchronized. Sometime in the later 1920s, that somebody got the bright idea of putting a soundtrack on the film. And the way this was done was optical sound. I'm saying this because I was a 35mm projectionist in high school and in college, and even on the side in the U.S. Army for a while. I was in medical corps. I helped with the big theater we had at Fitzsimmons in Denver, the big Army hospital out there. We had a beautiful theater there. Okay, long story short. What happened is along the side of the film, they would reproduce the sound by what's called an exciter lamp and a little knife edge of light, and as the sound was reproduced, this light would vary, and they'd photograph that. So it's called an optical soundtrack. Sometime if I come up here to a program, I'm going to bring a piece of film up here and show you what an optical soundtrack looks like, okay? They have it on 16mm. I don't know if there's 8s that have it or not. Later they had what's called magnetic sound. What they did is they had the magnetic tape alongside the 35mm film. Okay. They were trying to get sound reproduced, but the problem was, how are we going to get the sound loud enough for people in a theater to hear it? Tube technology came along. One of the first tubes that came along that could handle that kind of power was a number 50. It was about this size, a little bigger than this. Is that a 50?
No, sir, but it's that size.
Is that size? Okay. Are we up on time?
Getting there.
Okay. And that was used, and they were able now to
okay.
power speakers with these things. Okay, and some of them sucked up a lot of current. I've worked on some of these very old ones. The 2A3, they were triode tubes, and later they had some of the pentodes. In the 1930s, we had what's called the 6L6. I call it the tube that helped us win the war, along with the 807, which is a little bit different. It's like a souped-up 6L6, but it has the grid connection on top of the tube. A lot of hams like them. People to this day like them. There's some for sale here in the store. That's essentially how we got sound motion pictures going. So now if you had a break in the film, you could splice it. So what? You know, so you lost a little bit of the movement, but the sound would pick up in the next frame and be consistent with what's being shown to you. Any questions? Maybe I clarified a few things there for you.
Thank you very much, Bill.
Okay.
I'm always impressed when you can offer some of that history, I swear. I've been in this area for a while, and I've enjoyed this interest for quite a while, but we are surrounded by a wealth of knowledge. And those of us that are here today are eager to tell you all about it and get you going. So what I have here, I think I got it connected up right, is one of two operational circuits that I brought, and if you can't see it move around, the scope, well, white item on the right is showing to you a triangular waveform. And so you see a triangular waveform. Where's it coming from? Well, I didn't have the right cables. I used the paper clip to come right out of the signal generator here, and you can see that I can change the frequency. Now, I'm interested in knowing if everybody here, particularly the younger ones, know what I mean by frequency. Show me somebody that doesn't know what frequency means.
Oh,
All right. All right. So every time you do that of a certain length, it's always going to give you that same frequency, just like a tuning fork. Now listen. Okay, so we've changed the frequency here. These are audio frequencies. That may be near audio. So when I'm talking about frequency, I'm talking about a range of things we can hear, in this case here. Now, in radio, you're not going to hear those signals. You have to go through an electronic scheme to pull it out of the air. It's all around us. It's radiated. And you bring it eventually out to speaker or headphones, and we can tell you how that happens. And if time permitting, we'll be happy to do that. So, the only thing I guess we have time to do, we can spend a lot of time on this, is to show you we have an operating tripler that's using a wall wart to operate a tube, generally happy with greater than 90 volts. At this time it's receiving around 100 volts from a wall wart, 24 in, tripling, 100 volts approximately out, and I use 1, 2, 3 resistors plus the cathode resistor, which I chose to be variable, a tube socket, some nails, a piece of board, and I threw in 2 more components to get an LED light on it so I know my wall wart's plugged in. So, am I amplifying? That's the question. Okay, here's the out. There's the in. Okay, that triode is working. And so, how good is it working? Well, the only really way to do that is take a little more time than you probably need to put in this 0 to about 1 milliamp meter here, because it's really not doing a lot of current. This particular triode, it doesn't handle a lot of current, excuse me. And so I have a resistor here, which happens to be 47,000 ohms. Is that a lot? No. No, it's not, because one of my earlier charts here talked about grid leak resistor that was up near 1.5 meg ohm, millions ohms. That's 1.5 and 6 zeros, and so we're less than half of that. Now, why do I pick this value? Well, it allows me to get a symmetric increase in signal across the grid so that that waveform on the output gets taller and taller and doesn't clip on one end. So what does clipping mean? You can hear it on a stereo sometimes when you turn the volume up too high. Let's just go up on the gain here, and I don't know this generator, so it'll take me a moment to figure this out. I'm on the input first off. I don't want to be there. Let's go to the output. And let me see if I can find probably that attenuator knob right there. All right. Bill, can you change the range volt for division on the right there where that cable comes in? Yeah, exactly. Make it smaller. Oh, all right.
Oh, here, down here.
Yeah, all right, very good. All right, now look at the sharp point on the bottom and the rounded point on the top. We're already clipping this waveform. Can you see it? The round point at the top and the sharp point on the bottom? That means that we have increased the gain from the signal generator through this amplifier to the point that we're getting a little compromise on the top. If that was a stereo, yeah, I don't think these older ears would hear that, but if you kept cranking on that gain, yeah, you'd distort it so bad up top that you'd be hearing it. Is it measurable? Yeah, but is it important? Probably not, because by the time it goes through the speakers and, you know, over the wife's voice and so on, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So yes, we're amplifying, and we're doing it with a little over 1 milliamp. Okay, so it don't take a lot to build this stuff. That's the whole purpose of me being here today, is to show you can do this. Now, if y'all want to stay, I've got something here I'm going to put off to later. It's just another waveform generator. It's just kind of like that seesaw thing that I talked about, but this time we do it with 2 triodes rather than 1 transistor and a transformer over there. And this gives a very peculiar waveform. It's like unhappy, and it really comes across kind of squirrely, but it works. And now I'd like to turn it over to Lance. Lance is, once again, a local manufacturer of kits. These kits are fully outfitted with instructions, website, online help, and all manner of see it happen. And this is one of his superior kits, which is 1 tube. Now the important part, I'm sorry, I'm taking your thunder.
Oh, no, that's okay.
The important part of what his circuit does is it's easy for you to build, and it's regenerative. It takes some of the output signal, comes back in, and gives that tube another chance to amplify it. So I'm sorry, I took too much.
Oh, that's okay.
I'd like to just, I mentioned solder flux. This is it right here, DPO. This is less than $10 a bottle. This is the best I have ever used, and I've been doing this for
I'll do that for you.
over 50 years. It's for sale here. I'm going to take this home. I have another man who wants one of these.
And the importance of solder flux is if you have nasty looking copper somebody gave to you, and you want to solder to it, and it just won't happen. Every time you put the soldering iron on it, and the solder, it just won't happen. You can take one of these nasty looking pennies, and I'll do it here in just a second, and turn it into that with 1 drop. Now, do I use a drop? No, I don't like to use a drop. I take the insulation off one of these wires, and it's hollow on the inside, and I take a cap off my water bottle, lay that cap of my water bottle there, and put just a drop of the flux liquid in there, use that little insulation sleeve. Some people like to call it spaghetti, but it's hollow on the inside. The capillary action of that allows some of that liquid to be drawn up in there, and you just lay that right over on the item sparingly. This lasts a lifetime, and that's all you need. You don't need to be rinsing it to mess off with too much on your business. So let me move this out of the way. Lance has recently added a wonderful product to his line.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
Can we move this? Yeah, I'll get it for us.
Hey, like Tom was saying, my name is Lance Borden, and I'm the owner of Borden Electronics Company, and we make radio kits, and EPO sells them here. And I brought our most advanced kit. It's right here. Everybody can look at it. It's a vacuum tube radio. It has one vacuum tube. It runs on 2 D cells and 5 9-volt batteries. And I buy these batteries at the dollar store. I get 3 D cells for $1, and I get 2 9-volts for $1. And this radio draws so little current that these batteries will last for hundreds of hours. So I have a little transmitter down here that runs off of I have a CD player, and the little transmitter is a 1-tube transmitter also. You can see that if you want to look at it. And I'm making an AM radio signal, because inside the metal frame building you won't hear very much. Now I've got a little amplifier hooked up, and okay, that's turned almost all the way down. Okay, now I can actually take the antenna connection off and stick it down inside the coil, and it's a regenerative radio, so if you turn the regeneration control up, you'll hear it start to oscillate. Okay, and I can show you on the schematic diagram what's causing that. Can we get the schematic up?
Yes, sir.
Okay, does everybody read schematics? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks for asking.
Can everybody see this? Okay, it's a little small.
Oh, yeah, just reach in there.
So this right here is the symbol for the tube, and this is a pentode tube. It's got 3 grids, and it's got a filament, and it's a directly heated filament. It's a battery tube made to run on batteries. And you can see the filament here, and it's got the 3 grids. And what it does, it has a tune circuit out here, which is the coil and the tuning capacitor right here. That selects the frequency of the radio. So as I turn it up, you can see I can tune it in. And if I have this connected to a real antenna outside, it picks up many stations. It picks up lots of stations. And what it does, it takes the output of the tune circuit, which is the inductor working against the variable capacitor to select the frequency that it operates on. It couples that signal through this capacitor here to the control grid, which is the first bit in the tube. And then we have your B voltage, which is for the plate voltage on the tube. Goes up through this resistor here, and is coupled through another little coil to the plate of the tube. And what happens here, we have a control, which you can hear this. That is a potentiometer, which is a variable resistor. And so we can control how much of the output of the tube is fed back to the input. And it's fed back to the input at a very high frequency. And you can see that it dramatically increases the amplification of the tube. So and that's right now we've got it coupled to a little amplifier, but it also will work well with the headset. So now we make 6 different kits. We make from a very basic crystal radio to, we also make a replica World War II foxhole radio that uses a razor blade for the detector. And then we make a high-performance crystal radio that has a tapped inductor and 2 variable capacitors that works very well. And then we make this is the Armstrong 1-tube radio kit. Let me show you a little bit about what's inside of it. I've opened this up to just show you. It comes with the battery holder. These are all the small parts. Comes with a little earplug type earphone. This is the coil form. Inside the coil form, we've got a package with the tested vacuum tube. And these vacuum tubes were made in 1959 for the military. And it comes with the coil form with the pre-punched holes in it for winding the coil. This little package here has all the small resistors and capacitors, and it comes with the wire for making the coil. And by the way, we have very thorough instructions that tell you how to wind the coil and so forth. It comes with the variable capacitor. I have these made by a company up in Ohio, and if they ever stop making them, then we're not going to be able to make our kits because there's just nobody making them anymore. But it's a variable capacitor, varies the capacitance, and therefore tunes the radio. And we also have, comes with 4 little felt feet to go on the bottom so it doesn't scratch your furniture. And the board, I'm real proud of these. This is basswood. And we have, these are actually made for us by a fellow over in Houston who's a wood shop hobbyist, and now he makes hundreds of these for us. And you can see that they're pre-drilled with all the where everything attaches. And the instructions show we have a pretty good diagram of the parts layout. People that don't read schematics that well. Oh, that's crooked. What are we doing?
It's okay.
You can see that shows the layout of where all the parts go, and
Too simple.
Yeah, that's basically it. If everybody'd like to come over here and see what we've got, and you can see we even make them in a vintage looking box, because these are a vintage style kit. And right now, we're one of the very few companies in the world that are making these kinds of kits. And these are basically, this is the same or nearly the same as a radio kit that you could have bought back in the 1950s, even 1940s, and so forth. And that's our theme. All of our kits are vintage style radio kits. And you can buy them right here at EPO.
Let me add something to that. While you kind of get in line, if you'd like to ask Lance questions and see his demo, I want to still encourage anybody who has an interest in prototyping to do so. And so today, I'm not exactly very proud of these. I brought along some plywood I cut up. All right, so I didn't bring out the table saw, but if you are going to build something and you want to start out somewhere, take a piece of plywood home, please, because the rest is going to be left behind. And to go with that, and that's all free, I want to put these tags on the table. We have more parts than what's shown here, and what's here is an example parts that you can do something with. Now, you can light up an LED. There's LEDs in here, but you're going to need the resistor back here for 15 or 20 cents or whatever. Take a bag if you want to look at this, but in here are some copper items, and you solder to those. You can also solder to a penny, and anybody that has not yet soldered, I'd like for him to step forward here in a minute and get a chance to solder to see how easy it is. Someone take this tool, because I'm going to leave it behind. And as much plywood as you want, I don't need it. Now, this is your map of finding the things we've talked about here in the store. Take one of those. I won't need it after today. And Lance will bring a picture.
Well, that's about all I've got actually. The radio's here, it's playing off of our little transmitter, and if you want to, you can come over and tune it. Let's see, I think that song's played now. There you go. And when you connect it to an outside antenna, which we also make outside antenna kits, which they also sell here. So it'll pick up many stations. We've actually had a lot of feedback from a lot of our customers. One customer says he picked up stations 1,800 miles away with that on the AM band. So.
There's actually been contests, I understand, for the distance.
Right, yeah, they have. And actually, we've been making this particular kit since 1996, and so they've been around for over 20 years. And there's just literally thousands of these all over the world, and all the kits that we've made, we've just sold thousands of them all over the world, and they are everywhere. I mean, we've sold to people down at Little America, down in the South Pole, and we've sold kits to Iraq and Afghanistan, everywhere you can imagine, everywhere overseas, and they've actually been as far north as Point Barrow, Alaska, and remote little places like the Faroe Islands and the North Sea and so forth. Just amazing how many of these things we've sold. And it's been very difficult to find parts like the vacuum tubes, but so far we're still doing it. We have a little factory set up over off of Fuquay, and Tom helps me make the radio kits, and we've got another friend that helps make the kits, and then my wife and my granddaughter help us too. So.
If you come in to help one of those sessions one day, you got to be prepared to have someone kid you about something.
Yeah, well, we commonly insult each other many times during the day.
Yes, it's pretty much it's open season. If you have interest in sort of thing, you don't have a toolbox, start getting some tools. Get a bag, something to put it all in. That way your dad will know where his tools are when he goes looking for them.
Yeah. That's basically all I've got. We have 6 kits that we sell, and they sell them here in EPO, and so they're available right here.
But one thing I would like to add, if you build one of these kits, you're trying to hook it up. All right, number one, if your home has plastic plumbing and plastic lines, and you use that for ground, forget it. Okay, be careful how you ground it. It's critical. It's extremely critical on these sets. And another thing that's important is to make sure when you use this wire, it's not bare copper, of course. It's coated with a varnish type material or polymer of some kind. You want to be sure you have it down to real copper. And you must have a very good connection on it. My son found that out years and years ago when he put one of those kits together. For an antenna, if you're limited on how far you can run an antenna, maybe you live in a condo somewhere, an apartment, if you can get access to an aluminum window frame, or better yet, an aluminum gutter, they work great. I do a lot of vintage radio restoration at home, and what I use is my aluminum gutters around the house. I have a little knife switch that I can open and close when a thunderstorm comes in, but the aluminum gutters work great. Just take a little screw and get the wire up there, solder it, of course. You're going to have some bimetallic contact, but it's minor. Be careful. If you take 2 different metals and you connect them together, this is why sometimes you may have a lot of discolored water in your home. If you use copper pipe to replace some iron pipe or steel pipe, like in my old home, and your water starts turning brown, it's because of the corrosion of the iron pipe. If you have to couple copper to iron or to steel, you want to put what we call a bimetallic contact in there of some kind, maybe a piece of plastic pipe, so you don't have the copper and brass onto steel, onto iron. Same thing applies with the screws into your aluminum gutter and so forth, but not to that extent because there's not that much water left. Okay, but these are great kits, believe me. These are fantastic.
Anybody want to solder?
I do.
Please,
Okay.
please come up if you haven't done it. It's so very easy. Okay, so this is only 27 watts. You're not going to want to touch it to your finger. It'll change your fingerprint just like that right there. So basically you want to transfer heat. And that is just as simple as, let me kind of illustrate it in a way. If that's the heat source and you want to put heat on this piece of wood, you hold it kind of at an angle and you slide a little solder up under it, and the iron melts it right at that point, and then the flowing liquid solder, it joins between the hot point and the item you're going to solder. So that's it. It's going to flow some molten metal, which is lead, very soft metal, and tin between the two, and then all of a sudden that heat's being conducted into the metal.
So where does the flux come?
The flux actually is inside this wire. It's
It'll bend the other way. So it depends on, you know, if you're cutting this tabletop, you'd be cutting along this way, but if you're cutting the other way, you want to use the other way.
Like Ace Hardware or whatever. It's the same sort of thing your plumbers use when they come in and repair your household copper pipe. See that's hollow? See the little hole in there? I just pulled it off of a wire. So I'm going to let it soak up on the inside and watch what it does to the penny.
Getting it from a CD player. It's like a Walkman type CD player.
You can see the action. It's just starting to drive the corrosion away.
Is your transmitter?
Yeah.
And you give it a minute. Okay.
Oh, sure.
Now, you might have to have an iterative process. Iterative meaning you repeat it. Give it a second, wipe it off, do it again. Okay, so nothing to it. Now, I'm only going to demonstrate the first one, and then please just jump right in there.
Tempe, Arizona.
Hold it on there, let it do its work.
It's about $50 for the kit.
Because it's 27 watts, I mean, it takes just a little bit. But don't be nervous, just don't put that on your hands. And go right ahead. There's nothing harmful there. Move this out of the way. Because that's one thing you don't want to put your finger on and then
I kind of like
yes, sir.
messing with these cube radios, so I'll just put a whole bunch around the house and put a transmitter, and then
Just one transmitter.
have them all tuned to the same station.
Liquid molten metal coming from the solder is going to do the trick for you. Just get it hot and keep feeding it in. Leave the iron on the copper. Just leave it on there and feed the solder in. Doing fine. Just lay the on the penny and leave it. Okay, now feed that. There you go.
Whatever it is.
Once it's there, I'll just give you my lay on there and leave it. Now just feed the saucer in. Just feed it right in on the connection. Keep feeding, keep feeding, keep feeding, keep feeding. Beautiful, beautiful.
Really nice little transmitter.
Beautiful. Okay. Do another if you like.
Also,
Oh no, this is how you do stained glass. The other part is you just learn how to cut glass. And I'm telling you, I've seen it cut with a nail. And you can make beautiful stained glass, and this is part of the experience right here. It's real solder. You build it just keep that iron on there, and it'll turn into a nice pool. The copper-clad steel that's used for roofing material. You've seen those houses that have beautiful, what looks like copper on the top. Well, copper is expensive. I think it's like $3 a pound. And this is just copper-plated steel. So one side is highly polished and easy to solder to, the other side is kind of blemished. And in this example, I just used epoxy, JV Weld. I love it. My dad used to fix engine blocks with that stuff. And so I built a tripler, 24 volts in, 100 volts out. That one was 24 volts in, maybe 68 volts out. So now we're getting up in the voltage for a tube, and we're still not exposing 115 volts to anybody. We got a wall wart again. I had to label this one B+ because I get a few wall warts running around there. This one I think is 24 volts in order to get 3 times that up to the 100 volt DC. Everybody understand the difference between DC and AC? Yeah. Give me a question if you don't. This is kind of important. Okay.
Your wall wart is ACL, right?
Yes, sir. Okay. That's how we kind of charge a capacitor, and it builds up from the other half cycle, and then pretty soon you're working with something on top of something. The half cycle of one is added to the half cycle of another, and the rectifying is taking place in there. And I threw in an LED to be sure the power was there or not. Now, how difficult was that LED to light? One resistor.